In case you didn't know by me over here, food is ready if you want to eat during your working lunch or workshop. So appreciate you guys being here today. There's been a lot going on. Had a great stint in the district last week. Really enjoyed seeing community, student, staff, all the work they do. Is kind of great. It's a great insight as to who we are as an organization and the work that people do. So thank you guys for being there. That can be there. I know everyone has some busy schedules and a lot of there's often scheduling conflicts with these dates. But we're so glad that our community was able to be out there. Today's workshop, there's some heavy lifting. We have some strategic direction work, the accountability system update for 22-23 and beyond. And then there's a legislative update. I'm thinking after we've been through all this and we go through a lot of the discussion, I don't know how much time we'll have to discuss a legislative update, but we do have a lot of content for you to take home with you. We may be able to discuss some of it in detail, but I do believe the strategic direction work and the accountability system update work will be the bulk of this workshop. We do have that other information for you as well. And we can make sure you have, like I have some printed documents to send with you as well. So I know that we have a lot amount of time. I appreciate you guys being here. And Lindsay, turn it over to you.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Hi. We are going to update you guys on the work that's happened since the last time we were together for strategic direction in preparations for bringing you a recommendation for adoption at the March meeting. And so I want to make sure we have a chance for you to have a lot of clarity on the work that's happened, but also, of course, the chance for questions and the opportunity to feel really comfortable with what's in front of you. So to that end, we met on Monday in February and turned around that Thursday and reconvened with the Discovery Committee. And we spent a full day with that committee. And that committee, as you may remember, has parents and community members and staff, has a few high school students on that committee as well, which is always a treat. No matter what they say, they steal the show, right? And provide really good input. We spent the day doing a few things. Some of the day looked much like the workshop, where we updated them on the work that had happened since they had gotten together. So they got the chance to hear a little bit about the extended discovery focus groups and the survey, and they got the chance to get those executive summaries of the data that came forth from those activities. They got the chance to hear about our learning and understanding of strategic direction versus strategic plan, and how we could see this direction informing campus and district improvement planning, what it could look like using the community-based accountability methods to do progress check updates, to monitor our progress on those improvement efforts, and to report out. In fact, Danielle Holloway presented to that group just like she presented here in our board workshop. She presented to that same Discovery Committee. And then we also, of course, reviewed and processed and got reactions to the drafts of the 4 strategic priority areas and the pictures of success. And before we move on to how we spent the rest of the day, I want to tell you a little bit about what we heard from that chunk of work from the committee, because we certainly stopped and took stock at that moment. There was good table discussion. There was also really robust group discussion, and the overall takeaways from the Discovery Committee at that point were certainly some needs for clarity and understanding just about what we meant through the community-based accountability and what it would look like to really truly monitor the progress as we discussed. So even though an understanding that that's not part of the strategic direction, a very healthy and appropriate desire, tell us what it looks like to monitor how this impacts classroom work and campus level work and district level work. And so a lot of appreciation, even some questions like, is that a sustainable load? I mean, some of the same things we heard in the workshop. What does this mean for teachers to monitor progress like that? We also heard a lot of affirmation for, oh, I'm so glad to see certain pieces reflected here. It was something I cared a lot about. And I teased out one maybe of the more robust topics of discussion with the whole group actually came around this sentence, because it was really started by a teacher that was on the committee said she was so happy to see this sentence and this picture of success for student learning, growth, and progress, because it was something that she feels like is an area of improvement for us. She has watched parents and students struggle. She sees from the systems perspective some ways that we could improve, and even though she has seen some efforts at that, she feels like we have work to do around making it really easy for everybody to understand where a student is on a standard or where a student is in the learner profile. And so as she was affirming that, a parent from across the room said, okay, time out, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this really, really correctly, because I'm excited too, but does this mean that there would be work around toward a grade really telling me these things? And he gave a very specific scenario where he has felt a little bit lost sometimes in the system, thinking grade meant something and being surprised later to learn his student hadn't learned something, and he had felt like his student was tracking in a certain way, and he even gave an example one time of thinking the opposite. And so that led to some really robust discussion in the room, and that's just one example of the discussion we had. And as we left the room, what we took away from the discovery committee were not that there were specific missing ideas or things that people were struggling with being in there, although we left with a list of things to take back to the group and to be listening for in our next feedback round, but more that there was needs for clarity and people excited to find themselves, find the work, and find the things they were hoping for in these pictures of success. The rest of the day, post that work with the Discovery Committee, was really spent future-oriented with the Discovery Committee. We spent time with them saying, okay, these are our 4 strategic priority areas. We want your inputs and your brains on things that would drive the actions, so that when it does become time for the district and the campus to start thinking about bringing those pictures of success to life, we want your input on what might be getting in the way, what do we need to think about doing differently, what do we need to not abandon, and what doesn't need to be redesigned or reinvented. And so with that key group of stakeholders in the room, we really wanted to leverage that opportunity. And so we spent the rest of the day around activities eliciting responses from those 4 questions that you see listed. So it was a good day, full. It was one of those your brain hurt at the end, for sure. So that happened, and then we moved on and met with our district leadership team. And just as a reminder for those, when we say district leadership team, that's principals, directors, and executive directors. It's a room of about 50 people, and some of that time was spent the exact same way that we had spent in the board workshop and then with the Discovery Committee. It was the first time that group had seen the executive summaries of the data. It was the first time that group had had the chance to dive in and react and respond to the pictures of success and the 4 strategic priority areas. And so we were collecting their input and feedback as well. Example of conversations from that group really came from, this is the sentence I teased out from the same picture of success: students learning what's expected. In a previous draft, it said what the parents and community expect. DLT really brought forth an idea that, time out, the state really makes it clear what's expected for students to learn. It could be confusing. And the truth is, while we care very much about what parents and community expect, the state has standards. We feel like that's really clear in the rest of the picture of success, but we could accidentally create confusion and opportunities for inputs that were not, is not intended accidentally. And so just point of clarity, that sentence is confusing. And so that was a good edit for us to make, and that came out of that conversation. We also, in that time with DLT, spent a little more time talking more about workflow. That group has had the chance to learn more about community-based accountability, and so they are seeing some of that connection, although very much starting to think more technically about, okay, if we're all going to be doing that work around a priority objective next year, what does it look like as soon as this work is adopted? What does it look like to turn that into district and campus improvement plans? And what are we going to need to know? What does that workflow look like so that we can be best prepared? And that's what we spent time on there. After that district leadership meeting, we came back and took those inputs and made the revisions like the ones I just showed you. There were other revisions as well, but again, that group didn't speak to things that were missing or things that were present that were of concern. There were points of clarity and language changes made but the work that you see in front of you that is revised doesn't have substantial content revisions. There are revisions of language and for clarity. The other piece of work that has happened since the last time we were together was just last week at State of the District, and we took a different approach there. We spent a lot more time establishing the why now for doing this work, why this was, in our view, a really crucial time to launch, gathering everybody together and getting inputs and feedbacks and setting priorities that the community and parents and staff and students had voice into. And then we also, of course, shared what the process was and gave an overview of where we've landed with our pictures of success. We did also, with that group, Dr. Brent presented the relationship between this work and improvement planning and how we would be reporting out. We want everybody to see there is a lot of intention around how strategic direction will inform every single year the improvement efforts happening at the district and campus level, and what everybody can expect to know about how those improvement efforts are going and how transparent those updates will be with everybody. So with that, we're here before you today with our strategic direction. What we're proposing for you is 4 strategic priority areas, a picture of success for each area, and a what? Strategic, we're screaming at you. Yeah, knocking you out of your seat. Yeah, and surprise, right? Like you haven't heard it before. Last month. And then the objectives that are aligned to each strategic priority area. So those 4 strategic priority areas remain the same as the last time we were here. Student learning, growth and progress, student and staff well-being, staff recruitment and retention, and community and connectivity. And if you think back to the executive summaries that we shared and the artifacts from the activities and that discovery committee, those 2 days back in October, student and staff well-being, staff recruitment and retention, and community and connectivity were trends that we heard loud and clear across all of the data points, right? And even very similar blurbs and excerpts and things could be pulled from conversation to survey comment to data point. Student learning, growth, and progress absolutely is present in all of those data points, but we also knew walking in to this entire process that our organization needed clarity around student learning, growth, and progress. We knew that our 2017 strategic plan gave us a lot of information about how we wanted the student learning experience to be, but in some areas maybe didn't create the clarity about our commitment to students mastering state standards, growing in the learner profile attributes, and parents being able, and the community being able, and teachers being able to monitor progress and report out progress on students as they grow through the state standards and grow through the learner profile. And so we knew as we got started that we were going to want to create clarity in this process for our organization in a way that would drive work, that would allow for really, really clear progress updates on that work. And so we saw reflections of that, absolutely, in our conversations with stakeholders along the way. We also felt really affirmed as we got in a room with George Thompson to analyze the data. One of the early things he said to us was, you guys as leaders of this organization, before we ever dive in, you're going to see things the community and students and parents and staff say they need. You guys also as leaders know you're going to see what they want. You guys as leaders also know what they need. And that felt incredibly affirming because to us that speaks to all of it, but especially speaks to what we knew was a need for clarity for the organization around that first priority area. So each priority area has a picture of success. There have been some edits to these, as I said, but they haven't been substantial, but we thought we would just as an overview, read them to you as we move through the presentation. So student learning.
So can I stop and
sure.
ask a question?
You bet.
I've noticed that we've changed some wording, and when we met in August or September, Dr. Brent, we said we were going to work on a strategic plan. And then within the last month and a half, it's changed to strategic direction. So my question is, what's the difference between a strategic plan, which I kind of felt like would be objectives, goals, and those kind of things, and the strategic direction?
Okay. Yeah, in the previous workshop, when we went through those processes, what we realized was we believe we will have strategic plans at the district and campus level for the organization as a whole, for all 19 campuses, to have a picture of success and a direction working towards. And so what is the ideal state of student learning, growth, and progress? And because that was something we know we needed to give clarity around. And so the big picture in mind, looking forward into the future, here's what we hope to see and want to have happening in our classrooms on our campuses across the district. And so from those, we get the objectives that then each campus and ultimately the district plan would have the goals, the strategies, the objectives of what would be working for that aligns to that picture of success. And so we feel like you'll have a lot of strategic plans across the organization that are reflected in the district and campus improvement plans. And we have some information that you've not seen before today that will show you just how, as a trustee, you can track student progress in specific areas across the district and on each campus. But for us, what we've learned, and the team can jump in at any point in time, what we learned is to give direction to the entire organization that allows them to meet their students and their staff where they are in a certain area of need, whether it's student performance on STAR, or whether it's student growth and learner profile, any of those areas. We're saying, we want to make sure you're looking forward, that you have this ideal state in mind that we're working towards as a district, and that us as a school board, the superintendent, and district leaders can say, this is what we're working towards in student learning. And then twice a year and frequently you can track progress on those objectives. And so the strategic plan would actually be more like what our district plan is that year towards the direction of that picture of success.
It would be for a 3 to 5 year period. A strategic plan is usually for a longer period than a district plan would be, correct?
Well, yes, but it's the objectives, I think when we get through, you'll see the objectives allow you to adjust each year what those performance measures want to be and what they want to look like. And so you could say, the strategic plan traditionally, a lot of them look a lot of different ways, and we believe that what we needed to give was direction that allows campuses to specifically focus on specific areas. And so what we believe is it allows us a better platform to make adjustments for student learning and for student growth through the standards, because each year we can monitor and adjust where students are, where campuses are, where we are as a district, while still working in a steady direction.
But are we still looking at a 3 to 5 year strategic direction period of time? Is that what when
yes,
you have
ma'am.
this in mind?
Yes, ma'am. But also keep in mind, at any point in time, the board can say, hey, time out. We want to relook at this strategic direction, even if it's after 2 years. And that the board always has that autonomy. The biggest clarity for us, though, Jen, was when understanding the diverse needs of our district, the breadth of those needs from campus to campus, and trying to give clarity of it, what it is we're working towards, so that we can build quality objectives that every campus principal can internalize in their area. And then with our district improvement plan, as a board, we'll be able to look at, these are the objectives we want to focus on. Like it may be we want to really go in on a few key objectives this year as a board and really talk to us about how we're going to advance those. And so a collective strategic direction with a lot of objectives, and they'll walk you through that, allows the board to say, hey, this matters to us right now, and let's look at that in this year's district improvement plan.
Thank you.
Did I mess up the presentation?
No.
Okay.
There's one answer.
Yes. So the first picture of success for student learning, growth, and progress. Georgetown ISD students engage in challenging, inquiry-based, personalized learning experiences that result in their becoming competent, confident, independent learners. Students find meaning and value in the work provided, work that results in all students learning what's expected. Instruction, assessment, and intervention are aligned in support of students' learning and growth. Learning progress is reflected in a way that makes it possible for all to understand the degree to which students are mastering content, meeting standards, and developing attributes in the GISD learner profile. Resources are provided to support students' varying abilities and interests and to help them develop habits of lifelong learners. Students think about and plan for their future and are prepared for post-secondary education and workforce.
All right, and the picture of success for student and staff well-being.
And so after, well, I think I should tell you guys in all fairness, so after we go through all these, then we'll talk about what those objectives could look like, and we'll go into the depth of how you would see this actionized at the campus and district plans.
All right, so this one reads, Georgetown ISD students want to come to school. They are treated with respect and are respectful to each other and to adults. Students feel Georgetown schools and classrooms are physically and psychologically safe places where fear of harm, harassment, and demeaning comments is negligible. Caring adults advocate for students and help them make healthy, safe choices. GISD students have access to guidance, mental health support, and resources. Students participate in extracurricular activities and academic support opportunities. Student growth in their adaptability, perseverance, and personal responsibility is evident. GISD's employees find meaning and value in their work. Staff feel physically and psychologically safe and have the resources they need to succeed in their role. Georgetown ISD employees feel connected to their colleagues, their district, and their community, and resources exist to support staff wellness.
Staff recruitment and retention. Georgetown ISD actively recruits, attracts, and retains employees who embrace the organization's vision, mission, beliefs, and norms. A culture of engagement and continuous professional growth exists that includes peer connection, support, and collaboration. The district offers an attractive, inviting, and safe work environment, as well as competitive compensation and benefits. Recruitment and induction systems are utilized to attract, support, and retain new and existing employees. Induction takes place over time. However, initial orientation and induction experiences are focused on developing an understanding of and appreciation for the core business of the district. Professional learning experiences engage adult learners and include opportunities for staff to collaborate with and learn from colleagues. Professional learning communities thrive throughout the organization.
Community and connectivity. Georgetown ISD staff and school board trustees serve as community leaders who establish effective relationships with parents and other key leaders in the community in support of students and schools. Parents and community members feel welcome and invited in our schools and are advocates for the district's needs. As our community experiences growth and change, the district fosters cohesiveness through strategically aligned partnerships. The district is responsive to its community, adaptable to changing needs, and transparent with reporting progress and providing access to information. So those are our 4 pictures of success, utilizing the inputs we got through all of our, the pieces of the process. Each picture of success has within it, in narrative form, the objectives that we're asking you guys to adopt. And so those objectives we know exist to drive the work of campuses and districts toward improvement. You'll see objectives for all 4 priority areas. You'll see there's a lot of them. And so what we know and what you're going to hear us speak to is the idea that annually we're going to have to establish priority objectives. It doesn't mean work won't happen outside of those priorities. It always does with improvement planning, as it already is. But we're going to have to identify the priority objectives within each of the 4 strategic priority areas. And so we want to walk you through what that could look like, how to walk from this direction we're asking for your approval for in a couple weeks into what does that look like then on a district improvement plan or campus improvement plan. And so we've made 2 completely hypothetical examples, and I mean completely hypothetical, except for they do deal with school, these objectives, and school terms and real things. But I do want to say we're not forecasting future work. Oh, you might go get them. They're back copies. We'll get my slide. You might grab them from Sarah. So one of the things that you're going to see in your packet is this template. It looks really familiar. You guys had this last time where we started to show you that bridge between direction and improvement planning. And last time we filled in for you the characteristics of what evidences and actions would be, that they would exist in our improvement plans. We talked about that evidences would be qualitative and quantitative, that we'd be reporting out on the district improvement plan evidences two times a year to the board. We talked about that actions are evolving, also reflected in our plans. They might be abandoned if in a progress check we realize that action isn't bearing the fruit we want toward improvement. That action might be abandoned and a new action might be added. And so that looks familiar. The example document, I think Terry's going to get you a better printed copy. We're missing some of the evidences and actions, but they're up on the slide. What we did is in 2 of our priority areas, we selected an example priority objective and then walked through what some evidences and some actions could be for that objective. So hypothetically, let's say students learn what is expected ends up being a priority objective for us next year. Makes sense, right? So should that be a priority objective? It is born from the strategic direction. It makes its way as a priority objective to our district and campus improvement plan. Then the districts and campuses start working on what are the evidences we want to bring forth to you as evidence of progress toward that priority objective. And there are a lot of evidences we could bring forth to you. And we will bring forth multiple evidences because what we know is if we're checking throughout the year, there's some evidences that only exist because they happen 1 time a year, or even 2 or 3 times a year. And so we're going to bring you some things that happen throughout the year as evidence, but we'll also bring you some things that we know happen in more summative nature. So some of the things that could show up as an evidence for this priority are absolutely the percent of students that demonstrate grade level proficiency on MAP end of the year in math. Percent of students meeting growth projections from their beginning of the year MAP to their end of the year MAP. That's a number we could bring you as an evidence. We could, yeah, this is the page you're missing, but Terry was grabbing it for you. Another evidence could be the percent of students that achieve MET standard on their STAR Science test, a percent of students that demonstrate mastery of standards on their classroom summative assessment, or percent of students demonstrating mastery of standards on their classroom formative assessment. You can see an evidence could be percent of students reporting their own mastery. Down there somewhere there's percent of students that the teachers assess on a daily anecdotal log. Maybe it's their running record or their conferencing log of students that mastered the day's learning. That could be an evidence. There might be an evidence coming through from walkthroughs or unit plans. Those are the kinds of things you would see on our campus improvement plans and on the district improvement plans as evidences. You wouldn't just see one, you'll see multiple evidences because as we're updating you throughout the year, we'll be bringing you evidence from multiple sources about how we're making progress on that priority objective. And then much like you're used to seeing, you'll see the actions, the work that's happening to move us closer to that priority objective. And so we threw in some examples there from maybe science teachers participating in professional learning activities that will support them learning strategies for unpacking standards and creating aligned formative assessments. We threw in a strategy that students will begin through conferencing setting learner profile goals. And students will track their progress on those goals and their own reflections and update that progress weekly. The biology and algebra PLCs will focus on those teachers learning and implementation of strategies that support real-time in-class intervention for students, and that we'll be implementing learning walks and coaching rounds that will support that learning. So all of those actions on the campus improvement plans or district improvement plans are about making progress on that priority objective that comes from the strategic direction that we're trying to make progress toward. And how we'll know we're making progress is hitting those evidence marks. Stephanie.
So, and just for clarification.
You bet.
For every strategic priority area that a campus or the district chooses, there will be empirical data to support we are meeting it.
Qualitative and quantitative. Yes, ma'am. You bet.
Just using this example,
Yes, sir.
the goal, I mean, there isn't a specific goal. It's sort of students will learn what is expected, and then we're presented with specific data of how much has been learned, but we didn't set a specific goal of we want to be at 65% approximates or meets. There's not a specific goal. So you can say, you know, students learned more.
Yeah.
The data shows that end of year maps is better than the first year maps.
So,
But did they learn as much as we wanted them to learn? Did we have a goal here?
those evidences will have numbers in them, Dr. Benoit.
It's blank.
Because this is hypothetical, I was so afraid if I put a number in there, somebody thought Lindsay Harris alone on a couch made up a goal.
Okay.
And it got in the sun, or a teacher started sweating it or something.
Okay, well, help me understand.
So like, for as a district, well, there may be some people, like for the campuses, the percentage of their scores
They'll be different,
of
of course.
Met standard on, like, everyone knows they want to see growth and improvement on STAR.
Right.
Well, so everyone's going to have a different percentage of where they feel like they need to be on STAR, and we'll have a district approach, but, and we already have our goals for House Bill 3 that are still required for that
Yes.
STAR message
Yes.
as well.
Mhm.
And so there's multiple levels that we're trying to get reflection. And one of the things that we notice is, and we'll talk about that later in the day when you see how things are changing with the accountability system. It changes frequently. And so we want to give multiple ways to show growth in the students learning through the standards. That includes NWA MAP, includes STAR, and includes all the others, but there will be percentage numbers in front of those.
Okay, good.
We picked another example to show something from another strategic priority area. And this one that we selected was parents and community members feel welcome and invited in GISD schools. This is an objective from that fourth strategic priority area, community and connectivity. And so again, we selected some evidences and some actions that would align to that specific objective should it be a priority objective. And so you can see evidences there ranging from percentage of community members and parents reporting in real-time surveys or on climate surveys, those exact words, I feel welcome and invited. We also could show things from increased participation in events, showing that from sign-in sheets over years past or as the year progresses. We also just talked about that artifacts might show that, outreach opportunities where we've done the work and really tried to reach out. Other examples of evidence might be interviewing people and sitting down and pulling representatives across demographic groups and grade levels and that sort of thing to ask their own perceptions of what it feels like to come into school or barriers or keeping them from our schools and from our activities and use that as evidence. And so quite a few different ways we could show evidence towards that priority objective. And then actions, again, all hypothetical, ranging from learning for adults and efforts out into the community to connect people at home and out in the community to our campuses, to creating an action team that would really dig in and do the work about what gets people there, what keeps people away, and how can we systematically approach it as we learn, how can we implement and adjust systems that might move us closer to our goals. So those are some of the actions, again, that you might see on an improvement plan, whether it's at the district or campus level, that would align to that objective, that would have been adopted by you guys and comes from that picture of success, and how we would show you guys that we're making progress toward that objective would also be represented on our improvement plan through evidences that we would have shown you at the outset from the plan.
I think you mentioned this from the Discovery Committee, somebody brought up is isn't this too much? I mean, we can't do all of this.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah, it sure is.
It is.
I mean, it all looks good, but I was just thinking, my gosh, that's gonna be a lot of work to
It
do
is.
all of that.
It is, and
So we're gonna have to set some specific priorities.
Yes.
And say, you can't expect us to do all of this. So what's really important?
exactly. And one of the things that we're talking about too is setting specific priorities, being intentional about the number of priority objectives that we set, but also working the community-based accountability approach on specific priority objectives and using those behaviors on others, but maybe not to the same degree on every single priority objective. As we learn more about representing and using those behaviors, that may look different. Some priority objectives will get the full treatment, but other objectives still get frequent reporting, but might look at less evidences, or a principal or a district leader may not be creating new evidences for that objective, may only be at first using evidences that exist. But we're gonna have to be intentional, or we'll be spending more time showing about the work than doing the actual improvement work.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be aware of that.
This is gonna be very helpful for me, because I can now take this all home and I can say, for me, here are my top 3 priorities, which Stephanie might say, well, that's too bad because those are not my top 3, you know. But at least if we have 7 school board members and everybody lists their top 3 or their top 5, then we've got something specific to work on and get down. And you've got it all here on paper, so this is sort of homework, study this, and then be prepared.
And every campus will have different priorities that they will be focusing on in their culture, but the due north
Yes.
for every campus
It's the
will
same.
be the same.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And I think to the question about strategic direction versus strategic planning too, because we know this was going to be so much work, it was part of the intention around streamlining the number of plans we had, because before it was, you had your strategic plan, then you had a district improvement plan, and then you had your campus plan, and which boss is the one that you're actually, following and listening to, and honestly, we were reporting out on all 3. So that's why I think with this level of work, at least it's still in one direction with one plan, and not multiple different reporting periods and programs you have to go into and things that you have to do, that we're streamlining that process.
Yeah. And to Dr. Bernald's point, obviously, we like having our input and we have a lot of opinions, but you guys are really our experts on this stuff. And so we may set a bunch of priorities that conflict with what you feel and know is right in your heart. I'm assuming we're going to leverage Dr. Barrett to kind of check and balance those things. Is that the big intent? So that we're not overshadowing kind of some of the work we know, or you guys know we need to accomplish? How are you going to stop getting bullied by all 7 of us?
Well, I think one of the, point of clarification, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're asking you to review and adopt.
It's just that, right.
Well, all of the objectives.
Sure.
And then the work.
And
together
then we'll
with
set that.
Yeah.
Narrower.
Yeah. So
And I think that's part of just
But
like
aligning-
reaching a consensus.
Yep.
Like as a board, it's like, okay, we
But
can.
you'll carry their voices basically to the board. So when we
Yes.
start having that argument,
Yes,
and they don't get what they want, it's your fault.
yes.
But it's not, just want to
It's
be
all
clear.
gonna be my fault, no matter what. So,
Well, if we don't get what we want, that's your fault too.
exactly,
so you know.
yes. So I think, but that's also, they're part of the discussion, and I think that because we went into this thinking it would be the standard old strategic plan process, we realized we needed greater clarity and direction where we're trying to go. In the sense that a lot of these, a lot of measures come and go, but we know if we're working towards this, and then we're working through whatever the state puts in front of us, we want to do well on, and whatever the community asks of us, we want to do well on. But I believe that the board and this team working to reach consensus on what we think we can work towards. But I also feel like when we had Danielle come in the other day, because she was one of the piloting principals, as we can grow in our leadership, when a principal can come to the board and say, this was a big area of need for us to focus on, and so we went all in on this evidence, on this objective, and here's a great look at all the things we did in that area, like what Danielle was reporting, so that the community and the board can see the work we're really doing to improve student learning, right? And so it is giving better accounting of what's happening in our schools. While you have 19 campuses working towards one end in mind, with objectives the board says we really care about these, and also tells the other ones you're going to work on. And then they can also show where they went really deep on one major objective. They knew if they could move the needle there, everything else could get better on their campus. And we all have a pretty clean scorecard to look at. And that's what we're trying to get. Condense it so the board knows what matters, and we understand what the board knows what matters, and we can show you how we can reflect growth towards what matters. And hopefully it just cleans it up a lot, and we're have fewer plates spinning, and we're moving in a stronger direction.
I have a comment. I like the different plans, and there's obviously been a lot of work that has gone into all of these 4 different sections. I keep on looking at the student learning growth and progress area. And if we're talking 3 to 5 years out, and what direction do we want to move? We know where we're sitting with regard to STAR in meeting state standards right now. And I'm looking at the language here. To me, the language does not sound strong enough to really push. As a board member, it's not strong enough to say, in a sense of urgency and a sense of moving for our student performance. The comment here in GISD, we monitor progress toward students' mastery of the contact media standards and developing attributes of the learner profile. Simply monitoring progress is not going to change this. It's a whole lot more than that. And I think I don't get a sense from reading this than the sense of urgency and the sense of we need to turn this corner and we need to. I'm not reading that here, and I would like it to be stronger.
But this is just framework. Like those specifics will come when we give direction as a board or when they set their goals. This is merely framework, right?
But
we're not trying.
We are as a board. We are as a board.
So we would be able to go into the learning and say we expect to see X, and we could agree to set whatever that is.
Well, no, I think we said that we want to see student learning.
Yes.
They tell us the how. We're telling the what, they're telling the how, and they're going to show that. That may be one of the ways they measure it. But we also have to keep in mind, as we look at the specific objectives that they build out to show us that we are heading in the direction we've set them in, what is it that's important to the community also? And so if you refer back to some of the stuff we discussed at last workshop where standardized tests specifically fell in order of importance to the community, it was not one of the things that they pulled out and said, focus on improving this. So we've got to keep that in mind too.
But I think back to what they said, it doesn't matter how we feel about the standards. The state and the feds are telling us where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we could take that whatever, but we all know what path this will go if we take the position, if we take that position.
What position?
If we take the position that what you're inferring is that the community said that standardized testing, or that's what I'm inferring from your comment, that the community said standardized testing is not important.
I don't know that they said it's not important. Clearly it is important, but when we're pulling out what's most important, that did not make the top of the list.
Well, and I'm not, but when we're looking at the system,
Mm-hmm.
it has, where we are is we have to raise the importance of it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we can argue that, but at the end of the day, this gives us the framework for that regardless of where we chose as a board to set that, that's what this is establishing, right? We're not.
On the second page of that sample document, your first 3 percentage
Right.
indicators is improvement.
So
in
this would
student
give us
performance.
the tool to do that,
Yeah.
and we could argue that out as much as we want to, but you guys have basically created a framework that allows us to structure that however we choose. Or at least have that input and balance it with what the needs of the district and you guys have. Does that make sense? I mean, it's just this should give us that framework. It shouldn't prevent us from doing
I
that.
think the only thing, James, is that I would love the wording to be a little bit stronger.
Well, I think we can put whatever wording we want, like we could make those.
But we're going to be we're going to be approving a document.
Yep, I agree.
And
Well, these are hypothetical, right?
Sure.
Because they're doing the how. We're telling them the what and they're doing the how. And as an example, they're giving us this because that's how we're going to see how they plan to achieve these aspirational goals that we've set. But they're going to kind of tweak the how and also how to show us that they are making that. Like when we adopt the strategic direction, we're not setting this in stone, right? All of your what you just showed us.
You guys would be adopting the 4 areas, the picture of success, and the objectives. And I think
That's
she's
what I'm
saying
saying.
that.
Okay.
Sure.
And so
so what-
to
this-
drill that down, from there is where we're at now. We develop these examples, whatever they are in the future, and that gives us our priorities that we're then chasing as a district inside of this strategic framework.
Wait, so we're going down to the objectives, and then from there, y'all build the evidences and the actions?
Yes.
Correct.
That's where we really get to those specifics, are the evidences.
And here's what I have circled on mine. I put a lot of checks that yes, 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 yes. But on this one, in GISD, we monitor progress towards students' mastery of the content, meeting standards, and developing attributes in the learner profile.
Hold on,
We
tell me what you're.
monitor progress on this first page.
Okay, as an objective, yes.
What would you like it to say differently?
I would like it to say something that our students are going to be meeting higher levels of meeting the state standard, something that would, because monitoring progress is not action forward.
Yeah, we actually discussed that and kind of went around about it because that's why we had the one that's GIS students learn what is expected. Because that's the one that's actually about meeting state standards and learning what's expected. And honestly, it just got really wordy to be redundant to say, for the one that says about monitoring progress, also staying mastery of content, meeting state standards, learner profile. We discussed there are things that are required and expected of our students that don't even fit into those categories. They're required to learn how to interact with a peace officer. That was from the last legislative session. They're required to learn CPR. There's a litany, and so we just got to a point where it was like, if we just said students learn what is expected, then when we get into the evidences, then we're talking about all those things, but we just, honestly, there was a moment of saying, I don't know that we can, it didn't feel necessary if we just say, it is what is expected, and it might change after this legislative session, it will change, that we just felt like it was necessary to say, what's expected, and then we can show the evidences of what's in there. And that was just our thinking around why we had that one there. But then honestly, the monitoring progress one, we wanted to spell out specifically the areas where we're gonna focus on monitoring progress, because those are the things we want our community, our parents, our students to be able to know where they are on mastering those things.
And that's sort of the challenge of this is setting the direction of, these are the things we want to happen. And when we talk about learn what is expected, talking about the state standards, we also have in the feedback from the parents and from the community surveys, you have, it's sort of like any group, like there's a percentage who wants some things to be better than others, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and reaching the consensus is, we know that we want to make sure students are learning what's expected in the state standards. And how do we know that's happening? We know that we have STAR performance, we have NWEA map that helps us check where students are going, and there's all these evidences. And so that's, as a board, it's like, okay, what are the evidences we want to see that tells us students are learning what they're expected to learn? And that allows for multiple ways to do that, so that with some parents, it's like, look, I'm more worried about my students seeing this because, you know, they may believe that the state accountability system's pretty unstable and it's gonna move. And some people may find more value in the state accountability system, and if they do, what we think by doing this, we can do both. We can show evidence in both. And that's why we landed with the language is they're gonna learn what they're expected to learn. And here's the ways we can show you that.
The last thing I would say is that's why we felt the need to adopt both a picture of success and objectives, was you see the totality of the work and vision in the picture of success, but that's hard to turn into action and drive work because of the totality of its nature. The objectives allow to pull a piece out. The learn what is expected drives students learning what the state standards are. I think to the way that you're describing where the evidences would be STAR and things of that nature. And so that's looking at objectives in single nature is really about driving the work. Looking at picture of success is the statement of this is the vision for learning in our organization for the next few years. The work around learning and the outcomes of the work of learning in our organization.
So going back to your question, Melanie, what would it look like? And that was a good question. So over here, I like what you said here, the students learn what is expected. And I just took it, the students learn the state standards at a high level of proficiency. That's it. So I like that.
But does that include the other elements that we were just talking about? Does that include elements that
That's very
aren't?
narrowly focusing on what the state is measuring with standardized tests.
And that, you know, like you said, learning to interact with a peace officer. I don't know how
Which
that
isn't,
falls
right,
into that.
exactly, because the state, that's another thing.
It's a thing.
It's also just as important, but at the
What do you
same time.
call those things?
Legislative mandates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are typically unfunded legislative mandates. But, I mean, in learner profile, I think would need to be in there too, you know, about what's expected. And the other part of it is
Social skills.
social skills, things like that. And, you know, the other thing I think I would add to that is, well, I think I have 2 points. One is, I struggle with going directly towards what the state assesses of mastery of standards because we have so many courses that don't get assessed by the state. And so, you know, a lot of our students in high school will never take a math course that is assessed by the state, but we know that we want them to be learning what's expected in every math course in high school. And so I want to be able to talk about all of the courses we're talking about, because I think my physics course in high school was just as important, even though there was no EOC assessment that went with it. And so I want to make sure we're talking about everything and not just those courses that are assessed by the state.
But the state standards, even in your physics course, you have state standards.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But there was no way to show that there was a high level of proficiency
Yeah,
from a
like
state test.
that term of high level proficiency is a nod to the way that it's measured from STAR. So I would.
But it wouldn't have to be, I
words
mean,
with that.
the word here is STAR isn't saying that, but the high level of proficiency, you would want, as a physics teacher, you would want them to be mastering the high level of proficiency your physics standards.
Absolutely.
There's even our CTE courses have state standards. So that's our expectations for our students are that they're going to master our state standards at a high level of proficiency. In every single course we have, I think that's a pretty general kind of statement. I don't see that it's drilling down to details, considering the number of them.
So we want to make, but how can we make the language reflect that it's not just the state standards that we expect them to learn, I think is where
Because
we're.
that's too limiting, that's actually too restrictive to focus on just what the state tells us.
It would be the state standards and the
Right.
that would need to be in the sentence.
Well, one of the things I think you can do is like by saying all students learning what's expected, and you have your picture of success, they're learning what's expected, and then it is, well, what's expected? Well, let's show you what's expected. And here's where you can track, well, we expect them to do well in these assessments here, and by percentages points, we expect them to see examples of work here. So by giving the big picture of, hey, as a community, bottom line is, our kids we aspire for our kids to learn what is expected. And we looked at it as, what is a good platform for trustees, for superintendents, for leaders across the organization to be able to speak to as, this is what we're working towards. And here's how you'll know those things are happening. And that's where you can set a high expectation on a performance measure, whether it's a state assessment, a local assessment, whatever that is. The board applies the pressure to that system by setting that number, by setting that priority. And you know, that's how you push the system to move forward. And so there's a lot of evidences that show learn what's expected, whether it's from a state mandate, from a community initiative, or from the state standards as written by the TE, by the and here's the evidence and the ways you'll know that's happening. And that was the whole purpose of trying to stay general to the sense of directionally speaking, learn what they're expected to learn, and now here's the evidence you're going to see that says those things are happening. And that's why we went that direction. And it's all about trying to allow us and the organization and the community to have a position, but also see where those things are going to, assurances that it happens.
Any other questions or comments? Are we on the question slide? Did y'all have more?
Sounds like we're on the question slide.
Did you go back through that?
We had a timeline, and I'll share
yes, please.
I'll share this with you guys in this week's weekly. But our anticipation is after adoption to begin the work toward identifying priority objectives. As you guys are ready to adopt and finalize adopting all of the objectives, we're going to be beginning the work of setting forth the priority objectives for this coming school year, so that as quickly as possible, every department and every campus could go about the work of the needs assessments, their improvement planning, and also their progress monitoring process, so that ideally we will be sharing with you our improvement plans in August at the workshop, so that you could, and we can move forward for an August adoption.
So the March board meeting, we are approving the hypotheticals,
No,
or will
ma'am.
there be real data in these?
You'll never approve the data until it's time to approve the improvement plans.
Okay.
Right now, you'll be approving the 4 priority areas,
Okay.
the pictures of success, and the objectives. All of the objectives. We'll be bringing back to you via the improvement plans, the evidences and the priorities for
The
that year.
specifics.
Yes, ma'am.
And every campus will be different because they have a different.
Well, the district's priority objectives will drive campus priority objectives, but they may pull in other priorities. Their evidences may be
Right.
different. Their actions
Right.
absolutely may be very different.
So where does the school board's priority objectives come into this?
That's where I went during the improvement plan adoption. We'll work with you guys along the way, but I think that's where a little confusion was created. You guys are going to adopt all of the objectives, and then we will do the work of identifying which objectives are going to be our focus objectives for the coming year. When it comes time for campus plan adoption, if we're not working on something that you guys are asking us to work on, that will have been too late for us. So we're going to walk beside you guys as we're identifying those priorities, so that y'all know what we're thinking and why, because we're looking at capacities to identify. We're looking at data, we're looking at capacities, what, kind of an order of operations thing. And so we'll be telling you why we're selecting those things, but you may be saying, look over here, I wonder about this.
So when does that occur?
That will happen May, June, July, and then all of that will be
okay. All right.
wrapped up in the plans to adopt in August.
And this would allow us to have all the plans adopted before the, actually.
As school
whether-
starting.
Before
whether
school
you-
starts?
Yeah.
Instead of November.
Yeah.
I mean, the system's been in the past, it's been a little backwards, if you will. I've always felt, even as a campus principal, it's like, really? I mean, I've been in this for months now.
So,
That's-
so are there, to go back to Stephen's question, is there not going to be any longer board goals like in the past? Is that your question, Stephen?
Well, yeah, I guess it is sort of, but it says district-wide priority objectives finalized, but that's finalized or finalized by the staff, but not finalized by us.
Correct. Finalized by staff. We're going to go about some activities with the district leadership team in March and in April to do the work to narrow it down from all of the adopted objectives to what are next year's priority objectives. And we would like that work to be finished in April so that May, June, and July can be about needs assessments on those priorities, improvement planning, and designing the progress monitoring vehicles for those objectives.
And so I'm assuming that as y'all choose those priority objectives, it's because y'all are gonna look and see, we've told you the 4 directions that we're heading in, and those are kind of our aspirational goals. And you're gonna identify where we may be falling short and where we need to focus. And so we're gonna pull out objectives that support, but it's still just the overall goal we're trying to achieve.
Yes.
You're gonna find out where are we not achieving that, so
Right.
therefore we need to focus on this in order to achieve that.
Correct. And we'll have objectives in each priority area, and we may have more objectives in one priority area than another,
Because some of these we probably already meet, right?
or are closer to meeting, or aren't the work of everywhere, might only be the work right now for a department.
So y'all are gonna look and see where are we falling short and what's most critical to
Right.
catch up.
And we got Discovery Committee input on that the afternoon of our meeting this month as well.
To follow up on Jen's question, this doesn't replace board goals? That is a
Go back
separate
to
thing.
that other slide, that one that you had before, on that timeline.
Yes, ma'am. Whoop.
Maybe I'm not.
So, yes, we believe that the way. This does replace the traditional board. Now, the board has goals for House Bill 3 that are required that we set those goals. Now, the next steps for this process is board saying, hey, we really care about these objectives as we go through this work together. We're presenting you objectives and the different priorities that we're seeing, and that will become a conversation. And so here's where we are. How's the board looking at this? And then our district improvement plan will be basically the performance measure of the board, and we use to hold ourselves accountable to, are we achieving the work that we set up to achieve?
Under the best possibilities, after you have determined all of your district-wide priority objectives, we as the board would say, those are exactly ours too, we agree.
That would be ideal.
That would be ideal.
But we'd be
A
talking.
worst case scenario would be if we said, we don't think any of those are priorities, we think the priorities ought to be this. So, and we'll be somewhere in
We
between
have to
there, I
work
guess.
through that.
Hopefully we'll be communicating much better.
Better than that.
Yeah.
All right.
Providing those
Yes.
priority objectives, will the board be approving those in April? Is that what this is saying?
No, ma'am, you guys would be approving them because they're on the campus improvement plans. They'll be the objectives on the campus improvement plans.
But you are asking we approve all of them at this time? So
Yes.
basically this first 6.
Right, you're approving the pool
Every
in
bullet
March.
pointed
Yes.
item.
I mean,
And from that, we'll select. You're not gonna go off the
No.
range after this and
Exactly.
ad lib, or, so if there's something missing from there that we really think should be included,
Yes.
that's a discussion we need to be
Yes.
having now.
Good point, absolutely.
And that's why I'm bringing up my concern.
And so I think that
Yes.
means we sit down, take this home, go through this, and then an email, just to help move this along, we can follow up with Dr. Brent and he can follow up with the team. And if there's something you feel is missing, we can at least address it at that point. Does that make the most sense? I mean, it seems very comprehensive, but we also only have 3-4 minutes to actually look at each page, so who
Okay.
knows? Yeah. But
As your elder, I will tell you, I like this process a lot because it gives us much more of a structure in determining what the goals should be instead of kind of nebulously deciding what the goals should be. And it makes it much more of a collaborative structure.
it gives these guys a longer
gives y'all
term
continuity.
horizon.
Yeah.
But like Dr. Brent said, the board at any point can say, hey, we need to pivot and we can revisit. We're not locking something in that can't be backed out in 3 or 5 years, or we're not getting married to this. We're just trying to give them enough direction that they can feel confident in the way they're running, which I think is awesome. And you guys did the work for us, so that's even better.
I will say one of the challenges in this is that we will always be dealing with a moving needle from the accountability system. So if we have a picture of success for the direction we're going with teaching and learning, let's say that's the one we're talking about student growth and progress. Now, along the way, we know that STAR scores matter. We know that student growth matters in math. We know that all these things matter. And we'll be able to show evidences towards that. But we also know that, like you're going to see for this next year, you know, you're expecting over 40% of campus district high schools to see a drop by 1 or 2 letter grades just because of the way they're changing the ruling. And so if we don't have a direction and a path that we're trying to get there, as the system changes, our rating is going to fluctuate. And so what you're going to learn here in a minute is we may be doing better than we've ever done yet this year, but yet our rating is going to tank, possibly in 2 or 3 areas. And we've worked ever harder. They just all of a sudden said, oh no, the 3-point range is here now. Or the goal just got moved over there. Or now instead of a 10-foot bucket, it's a 2-foot bucket you're shooting for. And so we have that's going to be a political move that always changes. Whatever the state says the score is, I want to do well. And I want us to do well in all of the state measures. We also know if we don't have clarity and direction and how we're going to work to pursue growth of student performance in any area, whether it's STAR, all the measures, that's going to constantly change. So that's why we're saying let's set a direction what the ideal state looks like in Georgetown ISD. These are the objectives that outline that ideal state. And now as a board and as a team, each year we'll be working with campuses and as a district to identify that the key objectives we have to move forward in, and this is the data you'll see that tells us whether or not we're making progress. And that's how you hold us accountable. And so it's going to be interesting. But as far as what happens with the state, and so no matter what, we're going to pursue getting better.
So we've got 4 areas here, but we only have 2 of.
2 examples.
Just examples.
Yeah, are you going to give us the others,
The objectives.
the evidences for student and staff well-being and staff recruitment?
Those were just examples for clarity's sake.
Those have to be
But
ready.
are you going to send something before the board meeting with
You would like
the
anything?
goals
There's not
or
goals.
the objectives? Like you have the objectives on your packet?
This one only, yeah, I think this one got copied the wrong way.
We were just
She meant to be 2
adopting
sides
this.
and
I think they're in
Okay.
this,
Yeah.
the end of the
No,
packet.
it's not.
I will, so you
Make
got,
sure you got this.
This.
you got them at the last workshop. I will today email you an attachment
Please.
of the pictures of success with objectives. You
Yeah,
bet.
but it's,
So these bulleted.
oh, it is there.
Yeah, it's in the slides.
Yes.
but-
It's just missing.
Back in the front.
I'll still email
Never mind.
you the,
And so-
I've been sitting here with flipping
Yeah, it's in
pages
the slide.
looking for it.
That's
Thank you.
you bet.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Stephanie, you have a lot of handouts. Sorry.
I know.
for the confusion.
A lot
Sorry
happening
about
there.
that.
And we
Sorry.
came from a whole bunch of training, so our brains are like
Yes.
overflowing.
Understand. But yes, you will have before you the pictures of success and all of the objectives that drive those pictures of success. That's what we will be making sure we have.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything else on that? Because he teased us about the accountability. I think we're ready to get started. Any other discussion on the
Not yet.
strategic direction?
Thanks, you
How long
guys.
is it going to take you to talk accountability and legislative update? Do we have time for a break?
You might want a break.
Let's take a break. Fine, but a quick break.
Quick
Quick
break.
break.
We gotta get back in, we gotta get done by
There you
1.
go.
Who's that?
Yes.
Talk about kind of current setting, what's the adjustment, what's the impact. We do expect that you'll understand this completely and be able to profess this outside of this room within the next about 15 minutes. So,
Great.
there is some kind of complexity and convolution in some of it. That's kind of the nature of our accountability system. We know that, so just bear with us and please stop, ask questions, that kind of stuff. But kind of what we're going to cover is why the change and kind of what's going on around the state in terms of conversations about the change. We're not in a normal context, that I would say. I don't think that in 2017 legislators could have predicted where we would be in 2023 just in terms of life. We'll look at the 3 coming changes, specifically the timeline of data release and accountability ratings. It's going to be very different from what we're familiar with in the last couple of years. We kind of got accustomed to a pretty rapid release of information. We're going to go back to a very slow release of information from the state. There is also a change, not only is the timeline of that information changing, the test is also changing. So this is STAR 2.0 you may have heard about. And the accountability system itself is changing. So I'm not sure there's anything left to not change about accountability in Texas education. So that's certainly an interesting point. We'll share just some of our questions and wonders. Want to hear yours as well, and then some of our next steps. So why the change? This A through F accountability, as we know it, came about in 2017. This was a House bill. Kind of the statute intention is for Texas to be a national leader in public education. And so what came from it was an A through F accountability system with kind of high stakes standards. There was a commitment at that time to not change it annually, whereas the older system, there was a lot of annual changes along the way. Made it very difficult for schools and communities to really understand progress from one year to the next, right? Score, what it took to pass would increase each year. So there was a commitment to not do that. There's not necessarily a requirement that it should change in 5 years, but just that they wouldn't change it prior. There were some changes, which we'll look at within that 5 years. In a recent webinar from TEA, there are some pretty sweeping, or pretty major changes in terms of CCMR, and we'll unpack those in just a moment. But essentially 75% of schools were an A in CCMR in Texas. That's seen as a negative. The target, the quote was, the target is no longer rigorous. So, kind of take that for your own interpretation
That's
there.
pretty normal though over the years with the toss tabs teams, once it kept getting, that's why it has to be refreshed.
Just want to point out, there were changes, there have been several changes in CCMR. If you guys recall, even looking back at our recent numbers, we were mid-70s, and then they changed the calculation, removed the CTE coherent sequence, dropped us 6%. Changed the military requirement, dropped us again. And so there's, to say that it hasn't changed in 5 years is certainly a misnomer, at least as it pertains to CCMR. The major changes we'll look at in CCMR has kind of created an organization of school districts across the state that are coming together, are submitting a letter to TEA urging for reconsideration of that particular change in general. It's a 47% change in 1 year to the next, which is, I would say, pretty significant. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that.
Well, that's just that letter that I handed out to you guys, and basically it highlights on that third paragraph is a pretty important statement there, and then hang on a second, one more time. But in essence, the frustration I think you're just seeing is the moving scale. We feel like in general, it might be good to move that needle, but we don't feel like it's good to move it right now. We feel like too many people are in different places trying to understand where their students are, and it feels like it's a little political to start changing some of those, making some of the changes that are being made at this point in time. And the comments about the state's going to help us communicate that, we're like, well, wait a second. And so in his address, a meeting with the Commissioner's Cabinet, it was, we know that everyone's going to do worse, but don't worry, we're going to help you communicate that. We're going to have a big marketing push. And we're like, I don't know that that's really going to help. And so you can read the letter for yourself. I feel like it's getting more political than it is about kids. So anyway.
And a lot about timing of the change, a lot about degree of the change. Just 47% change. That's an adjustment. So take a look, just as a reminder, these are the last 5 years of this accountability system that's been in place. So 17-18 was when we just had ratings for the district only. 18-19 was when there were ratings for the campus and the districts. Those were the ratings that hung around for 3 years. Thank you to the pandemic. And so we saw 19-20, 2021 being majorly impacted by COVID and the lack of STAR testing in 2020. 21-22, this most recent school year we finished, is the first time there have been anything close to what I would call legitimate A through F ratings based on this current system. And so for it to not change in 5 years is kind of silly in the sense that it hasn't actually been the same for really more than a year to maybe 2. So, and then, down there this year, we've got A through F Accountability 2.0 framework to be released this fall in January, and there's more coming in summertime. That's when the actual manual will be produced following the completion of STAR testing this spring. So one of the major changes is the timeline of information that we'll get. It's also a standard setting year for the STAR testing. So essentially what that means is the kids will take the STAR test in May. They will then look at all of those, all of the scores, and then create the cut scores from there to get the distribution that they're comfortable with. I will say that kind of part of the commentary for this change this year, we've heard the commissioner and many others talk about the accountability system in Texas does not have what's called a fixed distribution system. And they say it is possible mathematically for everybody to become an A in the accountability system. I would argue that that is not statistically or mathematically possible because the test at which that's used has a fixed distribution, right? And so if most of the metrics that go into the system are on a fixed distribution system, how in the world could everyone become an A, right? So just some context or insight to know. We've heard him. I think he gets this a lot from districts. I think a lot of people push back and say you have a fixed distribution system to where not everybody can be successful, and he retorts back with, no, the system is not. And I think when he's talking about it, he's talking about the A through F, right? The reality is it's based on a STAR test that does have fixed distribution. So nerding out on you guys a little bit, sorry about that.
Are you, let me just ask the question.
Sure.
When you're saying, because it is a fixed, when you have a cut score, it is.
You're
it's a
saying
score.
who gets to be an A or a B or a C, correct?
It's gonna be who meets expectation, who approaches, because that's where the cut score is, correct?
That's right.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And those cut scores are set by a group of folks that look at it and so you see like,
yes,
yep.
yes, okay.
That's pretty,
It sounds like what we used to
Difficult.
call
Oh, it's
grading on the
normative,
curve.
right? It's a normative situation.
Which is how every
have they done it forever?
system, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the reason that I
Which
raised
I don't
this
think
point.
makes it right.
Right. I think the reason I raised
Love that at all.
the point is
He says
I will-
this.
okay.
That part's
This-
not really changed, that hasn't really changed, because they've had cut scores and all.
Yeah, they've had cut scores too, but
Yeah.
the unique thing is the STAR test is communicated as a criterion reference test, right? Versus a norm reference test like MAP and SAT, ACT, those kind of things. Reality is it is a norm reference test. They look at the scores and they set based on how they've done historically and how other states are performing on other standardized measures. They create those norm reference points. And so it's just a little bit of a left side of the mouth, right side of the mouth in both the STAR test and the accountability system.
And then the rub, once again, what Wes is talking about is not everyone really can become an A when your
Right.
test is, so.
Yeah.
No.
So, I mean, we don't have a whole lot we can do about that other than try to do the best we can, right?
Right.
So just some interesting points of dialogue. So timeline-wise, May, we should have some campus and district what-if reports, and so we'll have enough of the framework where we can use last year's data to see what we would be in this year's accountability system. And then we'll have STAR and EOC taking place towards mid and end of May, where those raw scores were turned around in a couple of days. We'll still get raw scores, but what we won't have are the cut scores. And so they have shared this as a
Zone of uncertainty.
the guidance for us. And so you can see how useful that'll be.
What are the numbers, the raw score, like the number they got correct?
So like this,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not correct.
So that's a third grade math
We're
example.
gonna start using zone of uncertainty in our own dialogue, right?
I think it's where we live.
That could be the topic of this whole presentation.
I tell you.
Little yellow right there.
We are right around level 10
Yeah.
with regards to the accountability system and the changes. So, late summer, the final accountability manual will be published well after all of the results are technically, completed. We will get the actual STAR results in August, in early August. You guys are probably familiar with getting accountability ratings around that time, right? And so this is quite a bit of delay. The ratings will come out in September at some point. And so Just kind of wanted to paint that scope of a change where we won't have access to near the same amount of information that we have in the past in terms of like kind of verified, finalized information.
So we'll be into school before we even have the results from the state from.
In a very finalized way. We'll have those raw scores.
So
right, and we
we'll
can
know the raw data, we'll know how the
They'll-
students
they'll
actually
know.
perform,
Yeah.
but we won't know how the state
That's right.
measures that
Right.
performance.
And we'll know roughly how they did, right? We'll know if they were likely to fail, likely to pass, or
Yeah.
we're not real sure.
When will the information go out to the parents? In other words, when will a parent know how their child done?
That's a cool
And
question.
on that.
That will be
Usually the summer.
about a week after the August 11th release.
So mid-August. Okay.
So they won't have that information until August.
Right.
Okay.
Because parents don't get the raw scores, right?
Yes.
So you all will know who will probably need summer school because of the raw scores.
We'll know who's in that, who's in those zones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're doing, because of this delay, Deb and Jen and the whole team have been working on how to figure out the program for summer school, because typically we've been using our STAR scores in order to use that as one determining factor in order to invite students to summer school. We obviously won't have that, and even, we laugh at the zone of uncertainty, and that's not very helpful information for us to get people in there, particularly with House Bill 4545 requirements around whether they didn't pass or did pass. So they've been working on analyzing map data, as well as when we get STAR interim data as well, STAR data from last year, to try and isolate, determine a good chunk of kids that would benefit from being in summer school, knowing that some of them will end up passing the STAR exam even though we invited them, some of them that we maybe didn't invite might not, and so that we can at least try and target a good set of kids in order to have there, but we won't know and have anything about that, and we won't then be able to implement House Bill 4545 programmatically until we have those actual numbers to start that for 3 through 8. And they're telling us that we'll have EOCs because, the big push here, kids graduate.
Right.
Kids need to walk. Our graduation is the 26th, 27th, somewhere in there. So, that's a problem, right? About
How do you do that? The ones who are on the line.
good question.
We're hoping we'll get additional guidance.
Give
Yes,
them a blank diploma.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
it is. Yeah.
Pending August. Alrighty, so we'll jump in and start talking a little bit about the actual changes. This is a reminder of how our current system works. There are 3 domains. The way that the domains work in the calculation is we choose we don't choose, right? But the better of either domain 1, domain 2A, or 2B is taken out of the first 2/3, and then it's weighted at 70%. And then domain 3 is weighted at 30%. That's what calculates our overall score currently. This isn't changing. What's inside those domains is what's changing. So we'll still hear about domain 1 and domain 2 and 2A, 2B, domain 3, that kind of stuff. So we'll still hear that, see that, and look at it. It's just what's inside is a little bit different. This is another look at current system. All of this information is, basically it's the averages of each of those components. In the first 3 Pac-Man, semicircles, whatever they are, is what makes up the 70%. The 30% is what comes over here on the far right.
In our current system.
In our current system, that's current system. So this is kind of taking a look now at the new system. You still have the domains 1, 2, and 3. What's shown on the page is just domain 1. But each school will have their campus scale score for each of those domains that comes in. And then based on the enrollment of that school, they'll be assigned a weight. That weight for all of the schools in the district will be added up, and that's what's down here in the bottom right corner, the 79 for that particular domain. So this concept will be applied to domain 2, 2A, 2B, as well as 3, and you'll each have these domain scores at the bottom, and we'll take the highest of either 1, 2A, or 2B, and the highest of 3. We'll take 3, using the same 70-30 weight system. So this is definitely a difference. Currently, all of the information is aggregated up into averages by components of STAR, CCMR, graduation rate, stuff like, all of those metrics, and then rolled through, scaled from a raw scale, from a raw score to a scale, and then used. So this will be a fascinating, that's the best word I'll come up with, way to look at the way that campus scores impact overall district. Right, you can see a larger campus is going to have a heavier weight in the overall, which currently our high schools do, because 40% of our domain score of the district is CCMR. Obviously, our high schools are the only campuses contributing to that, our largest schools. So there's similar concepts that a large school may contribute more than less. I think this is where we start to see the convolution.
So is that where the concern about the CCMR is?
We're going to get to that, and I'll show you.
Yeah, okay.
So this is not as much there. The weight of CCMR is staying the same. So it's 40% currently, it'll stay 40%. It's really the scale score that's the major change. Yeah. Alrighty, so looking at domain 1, that is student achievement. For elementary and middle schools, this is STAR. There's no major changes in this area. For high schools, this is STAR or EOC, CCMR, and graduation rates. That's where we start to see some changes kicking in, and we're going to look through each one of those. The major scaling changes for CCMR, and then the scaling changes for graduation rates. But quickly, what is scaling? And that is essentially taking a STAR raw score, and then at different grades or ages, there is a scale up to a 70 calculates into a 93, or a 67 into a 92, and so forth. So it's just essentially a matrix of taking a raw score into a scale score, and those scales are different depending on the component. Sometimes it's a 1.2 scaled up, or it's a 1.3 scaled up, and so that's what's being adjusted is when we look at those scales. So a 75 used to be worth a 90, and now it's worth, say, an 85, just as an example. All right, so the first one is in domain 1 for the district is CCMR, College Career Military Readiness. Just orienting what you see here is, so for an A rating in 2018, a district needed a 60 for that to get them an A. Same thing 2018, 19, 20, 22. In 2023, in order to get an A, you now need an 88. That's that 47% difference that you're seeing going from a 60 to an 88 in order to get an actual A for CCMR. This is the kind of one of the eyebrow raising points. This also calculates 40% into domain 1. That's a pretty substantial increase. There's a comment there at the bottom. This was pulled out of some testimony from Commissioner Morath, but Fred hinted at it earlier. Initial estimates show, excuse me, over 630 high school campuses out of the nearly 1,600 campuses rated will drop 1 to 2 letter grades based on this technical change. Commissioner Morath indicated it's possible for schools to see improved student performance but receive a lower A through F rating under these proposed changes. And so that is a clarifying point. That wasn't rhetoric. That is a legitimate truth in the sense that we can see our scores, our performance go up, but our ratings actually be lower than they are previously. This kind of takes me back to a conversation Terry and I were listening to in the fall from the commissioner himself, where he made some comments about next year's accountability system cannot be compared to this year's accountability system, right? And you cannot look at 23 ratings and compare those to 22 ratings. I said that emphatically, which where everyone sitting in the room was like, okay,
Yeah.
Who's going to not do that?
Right.
Who's not looking?
Where were we before? 68%? Our score? 68?
What was our score?
Our score was a 74,
Yeah.
which our percentage was a 74, which scaled to a 94. That's really close. I might be plus or minus 2 points or so.
That's fine.
But yeah, so we were 74%, scaled up to a 94, which was an A. And that would now be a C. Yep.
That's close.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
A to C, we did better.
And we will certainly make progress, however. and that's an example for, our CCMR, that percentage will likely be higher, but our rating will for sure be lower. Yeah. You'll see that as our next steps is communicating that concept. This is looking at graduation rates. So this is actual our data. So Eastview, GHS, Rasharte, you see that graduation rate on the far left, how it has scaled over the last couple of years, and then you see how it adjusts. So from 90 to an 80 for the scale score, 95 to 90. Obviously, Rasharte, the 100 to the 100 on that. So
The lower your graduation rate, the more they penalize you.
that's right.
I mean, even proportionally.
Right, and this is one of those that scaling concept is very nuanced because, tenths of % impact the scale score
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. So shifting, this is now moving from domain 1, which is student achievement. Now we're looking at domain 2. This is the one that's made up of 2 buckets. Academic growth and then relative performance. And academic growth, there are some major changes in the methodology as well as the scaling, but I would say that the methodology change here is probably a benefit. It's probably a better methodology. It's not quite as, it's a little bit more, I don't know, sophisticated if that's the word, but it's better, I think. That betterness is balanced by a decrease in scales though. So this is current. So when we're talking about academic growth, it's the change from the year prior to the current year in terms of the student's STAR performance. And so which bucket did a kid fall into out of those 4 buckets on the left? So did not meet or approaches, meets or masters. And then in this current year, how did they perform compared to that one? If they make progress to the tune of moving up a level, they're awarded points. The difference is this year, now you see a kid can move from low did not meet level to high did not meet level, and that growth is awarded points. Right? So they've kind of created some stratifications within the performance categories to recognize kind of what I call interim growth or
That's a good thing.
and it's a positive, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this, I think, back at the conference in the fall, this went over well. It seems like an obvious, kind of nod to students can still not be successful, but can be demonstrating growth.
Can be less not successful.
And just to clarify that this is still just reading and math because I think I asked the question to Commissioner Morale. They're not going to hold on to STAR scores for 5th grade science students and then see what they do in 8th grade. So they don't have a methodology for that. So it's ignoring science and social studies. It's just for math. And I believe though there's this now fixes the gap between 8th grade EOC or 8th grade English and English 1 as well because the scale used to not allow for growth before. But now that actually this will actually, because you're going from a category into it, they don't have to adjust a scale score for that.
It also allowed us to go from our Spanish test to
Yeah.
English test.
Yes.
And measure that growth.
This is another change, and that is the addition of House Bill 4545 results. And so the intent is to try to understand to what degree was that House bill effective in helping students become more successful that were not previously. So this will calculate it. I think this is what they're calling the bonus points. And so it can't lessen your domain 2 score, but it can increase it. So students that were previously not successful on STAR, if they are the following year, then they're awarded a one point in that system. So this is kind of seen as a...
Is that, sorry, point of clarification for myself because I wanted to remind them, have they figured out how that's a PEMS reportable code yet? Because that's if they move up and we indicated that they received their House Bill 4545 tutoring. And so we have to do the data entry to say, these are the kids that actually completed it, these are the kids who qualified but didn't. And I didn't know if they had actually fixed the PEMS, our data reporting system, so that they can actually compare and see whether they've done that. Because that's also an ask on our system of going through for every kid and clicking the button and then uploading it into probably not even until October PEMS submission. So I don't know how they'll be able to report this one by September.
I'm sure they'll tell us.
I'm sure they'll tell us the list.
If the student jumped and went from did not meet to meets, would they get 2 points?
No, on this particular
Most
metric,
you
it's
get
just
is 1
point. That's right.
But on the others, could they? Like, is it cumulative?
So on you can get a half point as a half growth, and so then you can get the 1 point.
1 is the most you can get per kid.
So even if you jump all the way to masters,
That's
it's
one.
still only 1 point? Oh, see, I thought you got 1 all.
It's just whatever's in the back box of where it matches up from where you were to where you ended up, you get that many points.
There's still a little bit of that, you either did or you didn't, but they're giving a little bit more, gradations through it.
But not really, it's still either 1 or none.
Right. Got a half point in there. So this is an example of just the changing scales, and so we do have the marginally improved table that we just looked at, but we do see scales being rolled back a little bit. It's not quite the same extent that we saw in the CCMR category, but there's certainly a scale score reduction. So that 70 is now worth a 65, that 86 is now worth an 83. So both sides of the coin there in terms of academic growth. 2B, started out a little weird, sorry. Domain 2B, relative performance. This is what's comparing our achievement, or domain 1, to other schools with similar economically disadvantaged rates. And so the scaling score, because the scaling has changed, the graph on the right is not different, but what is different is the actual scales themselves, right? And so you see the effect of that scale being reduced 47%. And here's just another example. That's 76, now worth a 69 for a specific high school. 78, now worth a 67.
And this is the year we changed how we administer the test to online?
No, we've been administering the test previously. Yes.
Across the state,
Yeah.
this is the
This
year
is the
everybody
year.
has to do it,
Everyone
we
else.
switched last year.
That's good.
Yeah,
Yep.
we tried to get ahead of that one, so that
Yeah,
wasn't
just curious.
also the change of the test and the change of the format.
May benefit us comparing to other people who have that learning curve, who knows?
Is this delay, is it gonna be just this year, or are we talking about this new timeline every year?
That's a
Did they
good
say?
It should be just this year, though. They will set the cutoff points and they will stay the same for the And they've already decided next year they're giving STAR a week earlier in order to get scores back in time for graduation.
Wow. They always see the problems.
So less of the year this year. So looking at domain 3, this is the closing the gaps domain. This is looking at different student groups and how they perform compared to kind of a norm reference target for that student group. Jump in and take a look. There's definitely some changes here. Let's see. So what you're looking at here, this is current system, and so every student group that has at least 25 students in it for that campus or the district is evaluated. That green check mark represents that particular student group met that target. The red X represents that they didn't meet the target. NA means that student group doesn't have 25 kids in it, so it's not evaluated. That's one of the major changes. Down the left side, you see the full list of student groups. Moving forward, there's a change in the number of student groups that are going to be evaluated. We'll take a look here. Sorry. You also see basically a green check or a red X, right? Another kind of binary scale. Moving forward, they'll go to a pointed scale of, there's a 15-year target for that student group, and if you meet that target, that year you're awarded 4 points. There's an interim target that if you meet that target, it's 3, 2, and so on and so forth. If you don't, obviously you have 0 for that particular student group and that particular metric. A major change I would call is the minimum size of groups being evaluated is now, instead of there needing to be 25 students in a subgroup, there's only needed to be 10. So what that means is a lot more groups of students will be evaluated under this system that historically have not been. I would imagine there's a statistician out there that has a question about statistical reliability in a group size of 10 students. he's not at the podium in Austin. She's not at the podium. So the number of groups, you saw the long list down the left side on the previous slide, and so that will be reduced to the all students group, and then the 2 lowest performing groups of race and ethnicity groups, and so of the previous year. So it's 2 of those lists from the previous year will be carried forward. And then the super group, or the high focus group, which is combining economically disadvantaged, special education, emergent bilingual, homeless, migrant, and students in foster care. So that kind of comes together as one big bucket in the Closing the Gaps domain. So we'll take a look. This is getting added convolution.
Wes, just real quick,
Just
just
you bet.
time hack. We only got about 10 minutes
Okay.
left, so.
We should be getting pretty close.
Hit the high
I
points.
think we're down to like 18 slides left or so.
With only a few of these charts.
There you go. So this just shows you've got the long-term target up there, the 72, the next interim and the interims. This is just that concept of these student groups being compared against a long-term, short-term, and shorter-term targets of performance, and then awarding points based on how those students are doing in math and reading. So alternative education accountability, what you'll see is one less semicircle. So for our Richarte High School, there was one less semicircle that was used. There was no domain 2B, school progress. And so the change is that now they have a domain 2B for retest growth. And so for students that are retesting the STAR test, if they, or the EOC, if they are successful, that's indicated in the domain 2B for them. There was an adjustment in CCMR graduation rate that if a student has previously dropped out and returns to school, they can be counted basically as a bonus, right? If they return and are successful, that's a 1 point for those students as well. All right, so now getting into our questions and wonders, as well as want to hear y'all's as well. House Bill 45 has been a major ask on campuses in the state. And the commissioner has made a nod to that. He told the legislative body that had we done a phase-in plan, that sure would have been nice, kind of thing, which I think we all certainly agree. But this requires 30 hours of tutoring per subject in which the student did not meet. The tutoring is required outside of Tier 1 class time. It's required to be at a 3 student to 1 teacher ratio. That is waivable, fortunately. It's largely funded through ESSER in the form of grants. We know where ESSER is going. It's an added indicator also in domain 2, right? And so that I would say from the state's perspective, they're valuing this thing, right? So then the question is, will there be a sustainable funding mechanism for this? It's obviously very expensive, not just in terms of funds, not arguing whether it's necessary or valuable or not, but it's expensive in terms of teacher time, tutoring time, student time, on top of just the financial aspect. And so, what's going to happen there is certainly a big question. Not even question whether it's effective or not. The impacts to the Closing the Gaps. I mean, that's something that's very different from just historic perspectives, going from 25 kids down to 10. I mean, I have a question about just confidentiality in regards to that. You've got that's a small sample of kids at one particular campus and a grade level, and it starts to get into some areas, but just another wonder. And then just like we've talked about, the longitudinal comparisons and how do we communicate what the commissioner so eloquently told us, that you can't compare 23 to 22, but really, we'll have increased performance and lower ratings, and as much as that does not make sense, obviously I think folks are going to have a hard time wrapping their head around that, because they may not recognize the improved performance, but we've seen just the lower.
That's more communicable though than lower scores and
higher performance?
no,
higher rating?
no,
Lower and lower.
Lower rating.
Lower.
Yeah.
Lower. You bet. And so that informs our next steps, which is just having conversations with district and campus leaders over the next few weeks and months. Just make sure we all understand this to the greatest degree possible and necessary. Taking a really close look at all of those subtle changes. There's a lot of nuance in there. And really just making sure that we fully understand kind of what those impacts will be. And then finally, just communication efforts with community leaders to understand that, to your point, Dr. Bernal, rising performance will still result in lower, unless we improve 47% in CCMR, which that would take us above 100. So our ratings will likely decrease from that. So that's the accountability refresh, kind of in a large nutshell. Wanted to take y'all's questions or comments or thoughts.
And that's certain, right? Like this isn't just a discussion of what it may look like, this is actually what it looks like.
We don't anticipate changes, we just don't technically have the accountability manual until late this summer. It's just interesting too.
But will it be apples to apples? When you said we could have better performance and our accountability rating be lower, but is it going to be able to look at things, which I'm hoping it will be apples to apples, so we can see that, so where we are this year and where we are going to be next year?
Where we are this year, meaning the 22 results? Like
Yeah,
what we currently have?
Yeah, will it be apples to apples? Will it be?
It won't be.
It won't be because the cut scores will be
That's right.
different.
And the test is totally different than the
And the
questions
test-
are different.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was actually the phraseology that the commissioner used, is it won't be apples to apples. You cannot compare 23 ratings to 22 ratings.
Well, even the rating, but even the school, even the test, it doesn't sound like the test is.
Because those ratings are derived from all of those scores.
Yes, but it
Right.
doesn't sound like the test even in itself is going to be exactly the
Right.
same. So it's hard to make that comparative analysis when the test isn't the same.
And we've gone through, I'm old, not the oldest on the board, but we have gone through so many reiterations of accountability, so many of the different testing. And it smacks everybody in the face when it's first happening. And we can either make excuses or, well, don't be looking for this. Or we could say, okay, now that we know this, where do we go to move forward?
Or we
And-
can say the commissioner continues to beat a dead horse by trying to make a
Yes.
system do something it's not designed to do.
I agree, but he wasn't always the commissioner during all these reiterations. So it's not just impacting us, it's impacting everybody in the state.
Sure.
So we're going to see lower scores or whatever across. It's impacting everybody. So I think that's sort of like COVID, it impacted everybody. So we just need to keep that in perspective and just keep our eye on our children learning and progressing. And I think you guys can get that message out there. And of course we can.
I think that's a key point. It's kind of going back to the picture of success. Are our kids learning what we expect them to be learning?
Exactly.
And why it's so important that we can't get caught up in every single metric on here.
Exactly.
Right?
And how we communicate it. It's going to be because the hard part about that is trying to communicate the system in the right way without sounding defensive or how do you try to tell the true story about what's going on with the system. And the challenge on that is, the bottom line is, as an educator, and you read the writings of people like Popham and others who were at the beginning of this system way years ago, that are coming out saying it's not doing what it was designed to do, and they're trying to make it do something it's not designed to do. And so we have to communicate that. We also have to realize that there's only so much that this thing can do for us, and that's why having our picture of success, having the direction we're working towards, and realizing that this does matter to a degree, but there's so many more things about our kids that matter, that we're really going to have to work hard to find the right balance of communicating it, no doubt.
I would just say the last thing that I would add, just kind of in the whole thing about our state accountability system, is kind of the major flaw of it in general is just that the test is not designed to measure learning properly. And so we have this whole system that's predicated on tests that's really measuring where kids started in comparison to their peers. And I think that's a troubling part of it that I don't want us to forget. Because we've seen, even in our in-class data, in lots of ways, we have kids that come to us at different stages along the way. That's generally what the STAR test is really measuring, is how far behind your peers are you. And what we also know is that generally occurred in the earlier formative years of life. And so I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I just think we can't forget that there's a fundamental flaw in this particular mechanism that we will continue to strive to do better in it, no doubt, and we'll continue to strive, but we also, we run the risk of telling our students who may come from the least advantaged homes that they're a failure the moment they step in our doors. And I think that's a major risk as an organization that we just have to be really careful about. So that's a little bit of
That's a whole different conversation.
that is a whole different conversation,
Whole
but
different conversation.
can't be kind of divorced from accountability as a whole in the state size.
Okay, I know the next topic we were gonna talk about in the
I'm gonna
workshop,
give you-
we're out of time.
I'm gonna give you some things to read.
Yeah, I mean, there's still so much uncertainty in the legislative update. You were just
This
kind of
is-
giving us information of what
Yeah,
might
so-
or might not happen.
Jennifer Hannah put together a lot of slides for you guys, and with a lot of information. If you, Lena, will you make sure they all get one? And these are some good articles that you might want to take time to look at. The one that I'm giving you is more of an email, and it's really interesting on how that financial guru breaks down some things on school funding. The other are articles you may or may not have already seen. They need that, yes. We're going off.
First graders can pass out stuff.
Hey, boom, we got it right. There you go.
One of the things we accept is that that's on papers.
So these are good.
They don't have
Oh,
the,
yeah, this one is Kevin Brewer.
Yeah, that's one's a Texas Monthly
Yeah, I
article.
saw that
Yeah.
on the website.
And the other one, the one of the funding, the one on school finance is really interesting. The point is just trying to have a better understanding of where the money goes in the state and how it could be useful in other ways. But those are just informational matters, nothing new.
Yeah, well, I will say that maybe at a future workshop, if the voucher program, gains traction and really happens, we're gonna need to address how that impacts us as a district
Yeah.
and our budget.
Yeah,
So that is a potential future workshop
absolutely.
discussion.
Guys, as always, we're always here. If you guys would like to meet with our team to discuss answer any questions, concerns, please let us know. Appreciate it very much.